I kind of want to take you down memory lane, and that when I first started writing books and I wrote Raising a Healthy Happy Eater with Dr. Yum, we call her Namali Fernando. Namali and I were talking about this cool woman who had a blog called The Lunch Tray, and her name was Bettina something. And we were following her for quite a while and have always kept up with her work and corresponded occasionally. But it wasn't until this new book, Kid Food, came out. Kid Food, the challenge of feeding children in a highly processed world, is going to rock your world. It is, I'm not just saying this, Bettina, it is gold. It is gold for every parent and professional. And that's why I made sure that so many people would tune in tonight, because they need this information. So, Bettina, I know all about you, but just tell everybody a little bit. Give me your dating profile. I know you're not dating right now. You're in a relationship. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. And thank you for that introduction and those really kind words. I am a mom of two. I am a former lawyer, and that's, my formal training. I stopped practicing law when my kids were pretty young, and eventually I got involved in school food reform in Houston, Texas, which is where we live now. And that really started to pique my interest about, the National School Lunch Program and just generally how we're feeding kids in this society. And again, I had two young kids of my own at that time and was facing all kinds of kind of unexpected challenges in feeding them healthfully. And so that, coupled with an interest in writing, I was doing freelance writing at the time, I decided to start The Lunch Tray, the blog that you mentioned. And I've been blogging at The Lunch Tray for almost 10 years, which is shocking to me at this point. And I started when my kids were 8 and 10, and now I've got one in college and one about to go to college. And so the culmination of all of that sort of writing and thinking about children and food is really what I wanted to bring to Kid Food, which is the book that just came out in November.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And tonight, one of the first chapters in Kid Food is all about the kids menu. And so we're going to be talking about 3 surprising facts about the kid menu, but actually I think we have more facts than that. So one of the things I love about the book is there's so much research behind it. And I've been listening to the audio version, and I keep hearing you say, and research shows, and all I want to do right now is switch over to the appendix and start looking at all these studies that you cite. Right. Man, you really did some work putting this together. So much research-backed material, and I thought it was fascinating that you did a little historical perspective on the kids menu. Can you tell us a little bit about the origin of the kids menu in this country, in the United States, and what did you learn about that?
Well, that is something that I was always really curious about. Like, even long before I was going to write a book, I always wondered, when did these menus start showing up in our restaurants? And what was on them, right? I mean, I was just fascinated by that. And so when I did start to write the book, it was a perfect excuse to kind of dive into that research. And what I learned was so surprising. So surprising fact number 1 about what I learned is they really first came on the scene at the turn of the last century, but really got going in the 1920s and 30s, particularly like after Prohibition. And this was a period of time when nutrition science was really coming into its own. A lot of information about nutrition was being communicated to families and to Americans generally by the federal government. And so our moms of that era were suddenly getting a lot of this sort of very imposing scientific information about nutrition, and really cared about feeding their children well. And their fear was that if they took their child to a restaurant, the food on the regular adult menu would not be suitable for children. It would not be healthy enough for them.
Oh.
So the children's menu was actually this like oasis that restaurateurs were offering of especially healthy, wholesome food for children. So if you think about it, it's really the exact opposite of what we say, which is, parents can get unhealthy and healthy options typically on an adult menu, but typically our children's menus are just like a complete wasteland. So we've really done kind of an unfortunate 180 on our children's menus.
Wow. The intent was so different back then.
So different.
I don't want to tell you how old I am, but I'm old, and I always remember a kids menu, but I don't necessarily remember what was on it. I do know for sure every kids menu that I ever shared with my two girls who are now in their 30s had chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, French fries, maybe a hamburger or cheeseburger. And
Right.
I haven't seen much change since then in the last 30 years.
That's the thing. I mean, I have read that, I just recently read a sort of projection for how the, movement in the restaurant industry, and maybe it's going to start trending a little more adventurous, a little healthier as younger parents start to demand that. I really hope that's true because I agree with you. I think what I'm seeing is still pretty consistent across the board. It's that same universe of what we think of as kid food.
Yeah, yeah. I had the good fortune here in my neighborhood. We have restaurants that we can walk to here in my neighborhood in Colorado of helping with put together a kids menu for our local Thai restaurant.
Ah,
And every single dish is just a smaller version of what you can order on the big kid menu, on the parents menu,
right.
plus a little bit of crudité and some sauce to go with it. So you always get some raw veggies, and then you can have a little version of anything on the big menu, and that's the kids menu. And it has been such a hit. I think at first the owners of the restaurant told me that at first people were like, "Wait, what? This is the kids
Right.
menu?" And almost a little nervous, like my kid's not going to eat that. But no, these kids keep coming back because they love it. They love it.
Sometimes I think this kind of rigidity about the children's menu is fueled more by parents than children. I really do think there's something there. I think parents are afraid that their kids can't venture out of that universe, or they might not, and they're going out to eat, and you kind of want a quiet meal. You don't want to get, have confrontation over food. And so
Right.
parents might be clinging to that menu more than children do. I think that's a great example of that.
I think it is, and I understand why. I truly do.
Yeah,
But you got to parent bravely, and we'll be talking about some strategies around that here shortly. But currently, what is the nutritional profile of today's kids menu, the one I just described?
so not good. In short, not good. For example, we know at the last count, about 74% of major restaurants still have sugary beverages on their children's menu, which really is something we'd like to see change. There's far too many entrees that are often too high in calories, too large a portion size often.
Yeah.
Lots of sodium, lots of fat. Just it's not a typically healthy bill of fare, I think we can safely say.
Yeah, I think we can safely say that for the most part. And you mentioned in your book that sometimes you might get one little healthy option and then all the other foods we just mentioned, the typical kid fare that we all think of as kid food.
Exactly.
And I just think that is something that over the years in our society, we have this label in our head of what kid food should be. And you mentioned in your book that even kids know what kid food is, and they'll list things like chicken nuggets.
Yeah,
They already have that label in their head. And
exactly.
changing that label, we gave that, we did that, we taught them that. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like, I don't really take issue so much with any given meal. Like if you're just going out to a restaurant, it's a special occasion, you're eating a not very healthy meal, that's okay. That can be celebratory and fun. It's that we're sending this message to children very repeatedly every time they sit down and they're handed that same kind of menu in every restaurant they go to. That's what really troubles me, is this messaging that we're giving children.
Absolutely. And those are the kids who end up on my caseload who can only go to a certain restaurant because they have to have that particular mac and cheese, that particular shaped chicken nugget,
Wow, yes.
etc. Yeah, yeah, they get very, very rigid. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, I know that a lot of parents may not realize that the restaurant industry actually promised a few years ago to make the kids' menus healthier. And you alluded to that a little bit earlier. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about what was promised and the status of that? Do we have more information yet, or what should we be watching for?
So actually, I have some news about that, which I learned in preparing to talk to you.
Another surprising fact.
Yes. So just to give everyone the background, in 2010, then First Lady Michelle Obama gave a speech to the National Restaurant Association, and it was a very hard-hitting speech. And she really came right at these restaurant executives and said, listen, these children's menus are not doing families any favors, and I challenge you to make them healthier. And so about a year later, in 2011, the NRA, National Restaurant Association, launched what they call Kids Live Well. And it's a voluntary program. And if you are a certified Kids Live Well restaurant, at the time I wrote Kid Food, and for all those years since 2011, the only requirement was to have one healthier entree and one healthier side dish. So in the book, and in many studies of Kids Live Well restaurants, the criticism is that's a pretty small change. And as you kind of alluded to, kids aren't necessarily going to be drawn to that one grilled chicken breast if it's surrounded by all the typical other kid options of pizza and hot dogs and all that. So in just double checking tonight to prepare for our talk, I learned that since my book was published, I think they are now requiring their members to have 2 healthy entrees and 2 side dishes. So
That's better.
helpful, yay NRA for doing that.
Yeah.
And then also the other thing that they've done is they now have a policy about drinks. And so if there's a drink that's on the kids menu, it has to be either water, 100% juice, or milk, and not soda. Now, of course, families can always ask for any beverage they want for their child, but to have the default be healthy. So I was really pleased to see that there's actually been some improvements since I wrote Kid Food, which is great.
That's great. That's great. And we're going to be talking in a few minutes about strategies where parents can help the kids get sort of unstuck from that kids menu. But since we were talking a little bit about legislation, et cetera, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that parents can do to advocate for healthier kids menus? Is there anything specific they can do?
Well, I think there are a lot of things they can do, actually. I mean, if we're talking about like a local, independently owned restaurant, you can talk to the manager or to the owner, and let them know you'd like to see more adventurous, wider range of options for children. I mean, I understand why we have kids menus. They tend to be more economical, and the portion sizes tend to be more appropriate for children. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have them, but I think if parents want to see something different, they do have to let people, the industry know. I think the industry does what they think the customer wants, and if we don't speak up, I think things aren't necessarily going to change. So that's one sort of very local, immediate thing you can do. You could also make your wishes known to national chains through social media. If you're really ambitious, you could start a petition. You can get your voices heard that way. And then also, I think a lot of parents aren't aware of this, but in 3 states, and I think it's maybe 16 cities now, there's actually legislation on the books to improve kids' menus. And
Really?
most of that legislation really focuses on that issue of the drink, to get the soda off the menu and to make it be milk, juice, or water. So it seems like a small step, but that's actually a big improvement when you think of, the role of sugar sweetened beverages in our children's diets. We know that they're driving obesity. They're kind of empty calories. So it's a pretty significant development. And that's another thing parents can try to advocate for locally.
That's so great. That's fantastic news. I'm excited about that. I'm going to share that with the families that I'm working with, and, one step at a time, right? One step at a time. Well, I know that we have a lot of parents and professionals listening, and, let's just chat for a few minutes about strategies so that kids don't get stuck, as I always say, in the chicken nugget rut. And the kids menu, that contributes to that naturally.
Yeah.
Can you give us some ideas about that? And I'll give you a couple too.
I can't wait to hear yours. I mean, I think one thing is you can just try to keep that menu from reaching your table. I mean, you can just say to the hostess or the maitre d', like, we would just like regular menus, please, and just kind of forestall the whole conversation. I think also there can be some creative framing. I mean, I think as all parents know, children want to be older. They don't like being babied in other contexts. And so you can frame it that way. Like, this is for kids who aren't ready to try, this wonderful universe of delicious foods that adults get to try, and so you can frame it that way. You can also, there are lots of ways, I think, to craft a healthy meal for children with more variety just from the regular menu. Many parents will order appetizers, side dishes.
Yeah.
Given how huge portion sizes have become, we can often share our own entree with children, and it's kind of doing ourselves a favor too, because we don't necessarily need everything on our plate. So I think there are ways to put together a healthy meal and a more diverse meal than sticking with that children's menu.
I agree. I'm right on the same page with you. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a really nice family a couple hours ago that I've been working with their child, and I was just offering some strategies, because when you're working with extreme picky eaters like myself, to jump right to not ordering off the kids menu is too big of a leap. But once we get the kids eating a variety of foods in the home, then we're ready to branch out to other environments like restaurants.
Right.
The most common issue around restaurants when parents contact me is, we can only go to 2 restaurants because that's the only place that Johnny will eat.
Right.
And the rest of the family, the other kids in the family are good eaters, but they can't go to other restaurants with the whole family because Johnny won't eat there. So we're working toward that. And when we do get to the point where we're ready to start making some changes, same idea that you mentioned, we will often talk about ordering a couple different side dishes. Or one thing I talked to this family about tonight was, they've got 3 kids. The 3 kids get to decide what mom and dad are going to eat. And they're all old enough to read. So they go through the regular menu and they decide as a group 2 entrees that mom and dad are going to order. But the rule in our family is we always take a bit of everything on our plate, not a bite of everything. So when mom and dad get the entree that the kids have had a little say in, then they're just going to cut off maybe a tablespoon of that chicken breast or whatever they happen to get, the salmon. And every kid gets a little smidge of that on their plate, as well as any sides. And then also maybe order 1 extra side. It's something we know the kids will eat. I'm fine if it's French fries in this situation, because eventually we're not going to have to order the French fries. We're going to be able to order a regular entree for all 3 little kids to share. And that's honestly often the same price as the kids menu when you're breaking it up that way, because the portions are so big. And then finally, the other thing I notice is really tempting is, you're right, the hostess or the host will go to seat you and they automatically grab the crayons and the color it in kids menu. So I suggest to parents that they go to Target and they get a couple small brand new coloring books. And everybody loves a new box of crayons. And the moment they go in, just immediately say to the hostess, no, thank you, we're all set. And then when they sit down, pull it out of your bag and say, look, guys, I've got everybody new coloring books, including mom and dad, and let's color while we're waiting. And then finally, last note, you were so good to mention about juice and water and milk being the option for the drinks. One of the things I always suggest to my families is that when they come, the waitress comes over to pour beverages for everyone and order, if anyone, maybe the grown-ups would like to have a glass of wine or whatever it happens to be, because on the kids menu, the beverages come with it, they tend to bring that beverage out right away. Well, a little 4-year-old drinking down a whole glass of milk, actually it usually comes with a straw, which means he can really drink it fast, or juice, he's not going to be hungry by the time that meal gets there. So I always ask for that beverage to be served with the meal and just to have everybody have water first so that they're really hungry, because hunger is the secret sauce. I mean, if they're going to try it, they got to be hungry. So that's a final tip on that.
That's a very good suggestion about the beverage. I had never thought of that, but I think that's really important.
Nothing wrong with, a glass of juice every once in a while. We don't want to have it every day, but man, it's so quickly absorbed into the bloodstream that it just cuts appetite. And milk is so filling. So good idea to wait on that.